The Sahel extends almost 6,000 kilometres, 3,700 miles along the southern edge of the Sahara, from the Horn of Africa on the east to the western Atlantic coast. There's little rainfall in the Sahel, and farmers struggle to eke out a living in some of the harshest agricultural conditions on Earth. As climate change brings more intense droughts and degrades land in the Sahel, intercommunal violence over dwindling resources has increased. Much of the conflict is between herders and farmers who vie against each other to use the land for their own purposes. Some in the region have joined terrorist groups, militants linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, who ride into villages on motorbikes and attack civilians indiscriminately. They wreak havoc and make parts of the region uninhabitable for civilians. While weak states and lack of development are big factors in the conflict, climate change is rarely discussed beyond the level of analysts and warnings from the UN. Unlike terrorists on motorbikes, climate change is a cause of the conflict people on the ground cannot see. But it is there. We travelled to Dori in northeastern Burkina Faso, where people are living on the front line of war and climate change. We wanted to find out how the invisible enemy of climate change is affecting people's lives and driving them from their homes. But first, we had to get there. Dori is the capital of Burkina Faso's war-torn Sahel province and home to thousands displaced by the conflict. The road from Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, to Dori is dangerous because of IEDs and pop-up terrorist checkpoints. Just 5 kilometres outside Dori, terrorists have attacked civilians and UN vehicles multiple times this year. Bagay Lamizana grew up in Burkina Faso. Today she's based in Bonn, Germany, as project officer for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification.
Climate change is a kind of invisible enemy in the Sahel conflict. UK Ministry of Defense said that 60 million people will migrate from degraded land, part of Africa, if nothing is done. I think neighboring countries and Europe can see this migration affecting them.
Migration manifests itself in different ways in the Sahel. Some people, as farming becomes impossible, move to the cities in hope of finding work, but often they end up with low-paying jobs or living in poverty. Some of those migrants in turn begin to move further afield, often to Europe. They take trafficking routes through Niger, Algeria, Libya, and then take boats across the Mediterranean. The crisis in the Sahel has displaced nearly 3.5 million people, according to the UN. We met Zara Ureta, living in a host community on the edge of Dori. She's one of the 1.3 million internally displaced people in Burkina Faso. Zara came to Dori from Arbinda, a town about 60 kilometres away, where extremists regularly terrorised the communities, killing men, women and children. An attack on Arbinda in August left more than 80 people dead. She describes the raid that led her to flee Arbinda 2 years ago.
Il n'y a pas c'est comme puisqu'on pensait même qu'on ne va même pas sortir puisqu'il y a 2 fois Il y a des balles perdues là même, c'est pas facile quoi. Voilà. En tout cas, c'est quoi on pensait là? On pensait que c'était bon, la fin du monde seulement, puisque les bruits de feu là, c'était trop. On a fui rentrer dedans. Jusqu'à bon, les feux, bon, on n'entendait plus les coups de feu. Maintenant, on est sorti au dehors. Quand on est sorti au dehors, bon, on entendait des nouvelles qui n'est pas bon en tout cas. Ce qu'on a tué plus de... Ce jour-là, on a tué plus de 18 personnes. Mais tout ça s'était passé, c'est dans le marché, puisque c'était un jour de marché. Ils ont rentré la première fois. Puisque ça fait que moi-même, je ne me sens pas. J'ai des ulcères, ça fait même. Des fois, même si j'entends cri ou bien quelque chose comme ça me rappelle de ce qui s'est passé à Rwanda. Bon, je suis une femme mariée, j'ai 5 enfants. Bon, des fois aussi, en tout cas, c'est que je fais le commerce, je fais le levage aussi. Bon, je fais travaux de ménage, travail de ma famille. Je m'occupe de mon mari et de mes enfants aussi.
In the years before she fled Arbinda, she noticed the weather starting to change. It diminished usable land and forced the community to change too.
Avant, il pleuvait, mais aujourd'hui, en tout cas, il ne pleut pas. Les gens mangeaient en famille, quoi. Et puis surtout, les enfants respectaient les grands. Les grands aussi respectaient les enfants. Les gens venaient, ils soutenaient. Par exemple, les baptêmes comme ça, les gens venaient, ils soutenaient.
Zara says that tensions between herder and farmer communities have increased, shattering the unity that once existed. Salem is also a migrant who fled terrorism. Like thousands of others in Burkina Faso, he's joined a state-backed militia group known as the Volunteers for the Defence of the Homeland. They act as auxiliaries and local guides for the military, but they've also been accused of carrying out extrajudicial killings against civilians they believe are linked to terrorists.
Pagla kam koda me sakda gulo sakda wala kodo butoto sakda pihla la terroriste huwa baras kalatin ko jere gulo kalatin gole ko kalatin ko abkin ha ton pil sora kom la konyudu la nimbana e kalatin karmi lo tori kalibe terroriste namba hon ton nembuide lebra nimba ran tar ton pisla ton ko ta songre ton kami be pisi ton ay te yo rapport ton ka yo rapport ton ni ngonta yo rapport wakat le nem tintin na bage yo wabu yikon lore tiam ta mi ti ka wa ne be jin kan yikon lore la be ab tiesa ye yam kami Kita pun waktu nazar, bukan nak mengerti apa yang tu nazar ni fo. Pisi model lah katin bangi. Abis saya kenal nak mengenal watan nambang amti apa malah watan. La problem apa pun sini sah. Ya lingri. Le problème de l'embuscade, l'embuscade, on solo rien, on va te convaincre. Là, il y a un moment. On t'a dit, prends la rodo, la terre, vous verrez rien. C'est ça, on a ça, on a pris fort. Par la tonne cahier, ton hand, c'est ton net, c'est un nage, c'est un.
Having lived in Burkina Faso for 2 years now, I've borne witness to some of the worst effects of climate change anywhere in the world. It's a big factor in this country's conflict. Step outside of Ouagadougou and into the countryside and you'll find vast numbers of internally displaced people living in extreme poverty. There are IEDs on the roadside, terrorists roam the countryside freely. The state is unable to provide security with an overstretched military and people are living in fear. It seems where people clamour for resources diminished by climate change, they go into fight or flight mode.
For those who want to fight, it means joining terror groups. Those groups mostly do not have a religious ideology as their primary aim. Instead, they're financially motivated. They're looking for resources to survive, resources that are being diminished by climate change. For others, like Salem, the effect of climate change means joining a local self-defense militia to try and fight back against the militants. But even he had to leave his hometown, just like Zara or Etta. Resources are simply becoming too scarce, and it's too unsafe to stay. All of them are bound by the same thing, the enemy they cannot see, the man-made warming of the planet. Climate change contributes to conflict, and conflict leads to migration on an unprecedented scale in the Sahel. Analysts say the Sahel is a prototype for what will soon start happening in other parts of the globe as climate change continues and nothing is done. But aside from the devastation, people in the Sahel want to take back control of their futures.
What is the narrative of the Sahel which we could put out there? The Sahel is not only the land where it's a black doom and dying. It's a land of opportunities, having the two faces of the coin, not only the dark one, but also the lightened one. It's a region where you had the great kingdoms. It's a region where you have a vibrant youth. It's a region where you have a massive natural resources. Climate change is not just happening in the Sahel or in Africa. It's a global issue. And it's undermine health, it undermine agriculture, peace, security, in employment, and even economy. So by bringing together and intervening the political will with the action on the ground, we could really change a bit the narrative of the Sahel and give hope.
C'est qu'en tout cas, moi je pense tôt ou tard, en tout cas, il y aura la paix. Et moi-même, je souhaite que la paix règne sur cette terre. C'est ce que, en tout cas, je prie Dieu chaque fois et que je demande à Dieu que la paix règne pour que toute personne déplacée puisse retourner dans son coin et que la vie continue comme avant.
Et tondo kota wende, ti tondo kamba. To lebaran dik ton naure. Bala tondo ya buri kimbi. La patrie où la mort nous vient en courant.